Hello and welcome to another season of Free Hit, an FPL podcast. I'm your host, Chris, joined by my co-host, Jace. Before we get into a recap of Game Week 1, Jace, I don't know if you want to take 5 minutes on that second half from Tottenham, or if you'd rather get into the rest of the show and circle back on the end, because what a disaster at the King Power to start the season.
Yeah, you got to really question Postecoglou's decision-making on how he approached that match. You know, I don't,
so?
with the personnel that we have, I don't think that that's our strongest 11. You know, I know Bissouma was suspended and this, that, and the other, whatever. I don't understand how you start Kulusevski on the bench, who was your best player all preseason and historically has been one of your most consistent players throughout the last 2 seasons. He's the best dribbler in the league, and I mean, he changes that game completely. You know, I think that's my first gripe. My second gripe is we really lacked any sort of fight in the second half or pride in the shirt, right? Even Sonny looked absolutely like just heartbroken for no reason. You know, we were up 1-0 for a lot of it, and then obviously Jamie Vardy scored, and it was like we'd lost the game already. Every player's attitude was like that. I mean, Brennan Johnson was all over the place. Madison was also all over the place. He'd hit a world-class pass, and then he'd trip over the ball. Like, it was just so inconsistent. Same old Spurs. I mean, there's nothing more to be said. It's just same old Spurs.
It seems to me like they're a team, if they don't get the second goal, it's very, very difficult for them.
That's football in a nutshell, though.
Yeah.
If you don't kill the game will kill you. If you can't go get that second goal, and that was our whole problem last season, is we could never get the second goal. Look at the Wolves match last season on my wedding day, you know.
Yeah, that was.
They came to me on my wedding day and said, fuck this, we're going to be up 1-0 for 90 minutes, and then we're going to concede 2 in stoppage time. You know, it was stuff like that. It happened all season, and that's the difference. You know, look at Arsenal. They went and killed the game, right? They got the first goal. Yep. They got the second goal. It was done. They could pass the ball around for the rest of the game if they wanted to. You know, the only team that can get away with having one goal and winning is United. They're the only team that can get away with it because they somehow always get it in the last, 5 to 10 minutes of a game. It happens for them every time. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it seemed like a lot of the same old going into the season. Spurs, second half choke job, Arsenal clean sheet, United kind of different 1-0 win than last year. I think last year they got very lucky to not give away a penalty against Wolves this season. I think
Chelsea winning on XG, you know.
Chelsea winning on XG at home and losing the match. That's exactly right. So from an FPL standpoint, we've at least got some predictability. The last thing I wanted to ask you on Spurs, this was the debut for Solanke, who was originally priced at $7.5 million when he was with Bournemouth. First appearance in a Spurs jersey. What were your impressions of him?
If he could not hit the ball directly at the keeper every time he shoots, I feel like he's going to be very successful. But, even him, every shot he took went directly at the keeper or wide of the goal. You know what I mean? He didn't have that killer instinct that Harry Kane had, where he could finish from anywhere in the box and find a post or the side net or whatever. So I was pleased with how he played. I thought his hold-up play was fine. He was getting the shit fouled out of him, which happens in the Premier League. But you got to have end product, and that's what Spurs have been lacking. And we were hoping he would bring, right. In this game, unfortunately, he was as useful as Richarlison was.
Yeah, two shots on target, 0.34 expected goals, 0.15 expected assists. So pretty decent underlying numbers.
Underlying numbers were great, but
really.
I mean, look at all of Tottenham's underlying numbers: XG, possession, shots, corners. Right, we won in every category except the one that mattered, which is balls hitting the back of the net.
Well, before we get into each match, what I want to do is kind of take things back. Game week 1 deadline, or even kind of that week as you're talking to Mauricio from the Onside Offside blog about some of the new managers and their tactical setups. By the way, great episode. If you're listening and you did not hear kind of our last episode of the preseason, I would definitely go check that out. Was there anything, after talking to Mauricio, within your team structure or dynamic that you changed as a result of maybe some information from that conversation?
No, I didn't change anything. I would say it reaffirmed a lot of the things that I thought putting my team together going into that episode. He brought up some really good points during the Brighton conversation about their new winger. And I know he got a lot of play in FPL Twitter that week as well. So I looked at them hard. I looked at Barco hard and kept him when, days before I think it came out that he, Brighton signed a couple players and everybody was like, okay, maybe you should get off Barco, which I did because he didn't feature at all in this match. I've already traded him, burned that transfer. But beyond that, like I said, it was pretty reaffirming to what I was thinking. The only position I was really unsure of was Ben White. I didn't know if I should stick with White, twist to a Gabriel or a Saliba, or go a different direction entirely. And at the end of the day, I decided to stick with White just because I do think he was their most attacking defender last season, right? I think he was the highest scoring defender. But I also didn't think Arteta would make that many changes. And if he did, it would be on the other side with Zinchenko because of how shaky his defending is in one-on-one situations, which we saw that substitution made there at the end of that game. So I'm glad I stuck around with White. I went big at the back, and all three of them returned, which was cool. I feel like that rarely happens. It certainly didn't happen last season, right? So I was pretty excited with my lineup with everybody I put on the field until I saw the team sheet today for Spurs and saw Kulusevski on the bench, and then I really just wanted to stick my foot up my own ass because it was just, again, I just can't understand it. How he was our best player during the entirety of preseason, and he sat him on the bench, and he would have changed that game dramatically. And unfortunately, he only got 15 minutes to show. But in that 15 minutes, I think he had 7 touches in the opponent's box. So, it is what it is. But other than that, I was pretty pleased. 69 points is what I'm going to end on, Chris. And as you recall from last season, that's kind of the weekly goal, is to kind of stay around that range. That's the math for me. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that final lineup I went out with. I know you were pretty anti-White and didn't think we needed to spend the money on him, but curious to hear what you think.
Yeah, so for everybody listening, Jace's final team: Dean Henderson, Ben White, Trent, Gavard, Anthony Gordon, Kulusevski, Gibbs White, Jota, Muniz, Holland, Havertz, and then on the bench, Leno, Smith Rowe, Barco, and Harwood Bellis. I felt like it's a lot of money in defense, but to your point, all three of them returned in game week 1, which if you were going to go with an Arsenal asset in particular, Havertz, Saka, Ben White, Gabriel, Saliba, Raya, etc., they kind of had to return in game week 1 because their remaining fixtures from game week 2 to game week 5 are pretty tricky. At Spurs, they play City, they play Villa, they play Brighton. So you really needed that Wolves fixture to kind of become a home banker, which it really did in this game week. I think my question is, do you feel like with Kulusevski now being potentially an issue from an FPL standpoint, are you going to have to make an early transfer, or are you going to kind of dip into your bench for a couple weeks?
No, I think Postecoglou saw what I saw here, right? I think he understood that he needed Kulusevski in the game. He was the first substitution he put up to the line. I think he starts next time out. So I'm not worried about Kulusevski. As I mentioned, I did transfer Barco out for Xerxes. I don't know if you saw. I thought he played really well for United. He was 4.5. I had exactly $500,000 left in the bank, so I could upgrade Barco to Xerxes before the price drop on Barco. And I know how budget sensitive this season's going to be, so I wanted to preserve my full budget right? And B, I can rotate him in, as you mentioned, for Ben White because because Liverpool and City both have pretty good fixtures the next 3 weeks. So really, it's just Ben White and Arsenal. So I'll rotate, I think, Xerxes with Ben White this week, bring him back in next week, and then rotate him again the week after. So I've got a good plan there. I think my keepers fixtures line up really well. So I'm happy with the rest of my team. I really am. Hardwood Bells, he's gonna play, right? So that's the only he's the budget defender. He's never gonna see the field, but at least I know he'll play and maybe get me a point, right? Rest of it I'm happy with.
So to be clear, you've already made a transfer.
Yeah, 100%.
It is Monday.
It's
game
Monday.
Week 1. We have brought in the non-nailed Joshua Xerxes of
That's
Manchester
correct.
United. Okay, that is a gamble, sir.
Yeah.
I can't say that I back that one, but I wish you luck. I agree. He did play well. When he
Played really
came
well.
on. Hopefully it's enough to earn the start next week
Yeah, I
for
think so.
Manchester United. Anybody else that was almost in your team that didn't quite make it on deadline day? Any decisions you were really back and forth on?
No, because the big thing was budget, right? If I was going to make any other decision, it was going to be, okay, is Haaland going to be in my team or is he not going to be in my team? That was the ultimate kind of factor in my team building here was, do I want Haaland? Do I not want Haaland? If I wanted Haaland, I pretty much had to keep everything else the same, right? I was confident that Jota could cover Salah's points. I was only half right this week, but we'll see how that plays out as the season goes. And, I knew Haaland was going to score, but I still thought Havertz was the best captain option for me. And that turned out pretty well. Goal and assist, 3 bonus points, right? So, like I said, I'm feeling it pretty good. Everyone else, I couldn't have afforded if I still had Haaland, just based on the budget. And there weren't any really defenders that I was crazy about to warrant, changing that whole back line. So, like I said, I'm pretty happy with the team I've got right now, and we'll see what happens.
Awesome. I'll pull up my team as well because I did make some changes from our last conversation. So I settled on Henderson, Trent, Mikolenko, Pedro Porro, Nkunku, Morgan Rogers, Eze, Salah, Isak, Holland, Muniz, and then on the bench, Bentley, who's the 4.0 keeper from Wolves, ESR, Anthony Robinson. And I also stuck with Barco. I did think he was going to play at least for the first couple game weeks, but I have 2 other playing bench players on my team, so not a huge deal. I originally had 3 4-5 defenders and 0.5 in the bank. I also had Morgan Gibbs-White in midfield at one point instead of Smith Rowe. I couldn't get behind the additional $1 million between Gibbs, White, and Smith Rowe. I thought Smith Rowe, for that price, given Fulham's fixtures, was potentially a better pick. So I was not super thrilled with what I saw from Fulham in game week 1, but they have a great fixture, Leicester City at home, followed by Ipswich away in the next 2. So I think that'll tell us more about them as a unit. The other guy that I added at the last minute was Porro, which was awesome to see that he returned today, and his underlying numbers were great as well. Konsa from Aston Villa was the 4-5 in this spot, but with kind of some of the other changes I was able to make, I thought rather than having 0.5 in the bank, I downgraded my second keeper to 4.0 and then upgraded Konsa to Pedro Porro, who I think I'm likely to keep at least for the first 2 game weeks, while Tottenham have pretty favorable fixtures in the near term. So the one thing from the conversation with Mauricio that was interesting to me was the Brighton goalkeeper. He talked about how in Hersler's system, the center back pushes up into midfield and the keeper sort of forms a back 3. And if the keeper is going to be on the ball a lot, he's going to accumulate BPS. And I think Brighton had some positive regression in terms of defensive performance to realize this season. But I didn't know whether Verbruggen or Steele, was 100% nailed into that role. So ended up on Henderson, which I think was pretty much the consensus 4-5 keeper alongside Flecken. to start the season. So, what do you think of this team? I also went with Holland. I also went with Trent. I did go Mo, did not go Jada. But overall, I thought it was a pretty kind of safe team for game week 1.
Why did you go with Bentley as the 4.0 keeper? Was there a reason you went with the backup at Wolves, or?
Yeah, it really, I didn't want to take up a third Palace slot. So if I had Matthews as Henderson's backup, then with Eze in the midfield, I would have 3. The Brentford backup keeper, who's 4.0, was like 20% owned. So I felt like there was a price drop coming there. Same thing with Turner and Forrest. So I chose a team who I did not think I was going to have 3 assets from that team, at least in the short term, as the backup keeper.
Gotcha. I misspoke earlier, buddy. I'm sorry. I did not go with Xerxes. I went with Mazraoui. That was who I replaced Barco with. He's the other United unknown.
That makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know why. Yeah. Played really well.
Yeah,
that's who I was talking about, not Xerxes. Great. Yeah, I got him confused. Whatever. They're both no-name United players. Whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, thoughts on this?
No, it made sense. Draft? Yeah. Do you regret bringing Rodgers in?
I thought he played pretty well. At least for the first couple weeks, he seems like he's going to be a playing 5.0 mid on a good team with some decent fixtures. He will probably rotate with Bailey and some of the other guys that Villa have, but I thought his first performance was completely fine. Like I said, the Fulham guys really over the next 2 weeks have the much better fixtures, so Rodgers
absolutely
will likely be on the bench. The guy that I'm kind of regretting is Nkunku.
That was my next question.
You
and everyone else on Twitter.
Mbumo is 0.5 more. I think now knowing that Tony is not part of the squad, that changes that dynamic a little bit. And I think I could have squeezed Mbumo, I think, somewhere for 0.5 more. But at the same time, I had Gvardiol in a lot of my drafts. I'm really happy that I upgraded to Trent after Liverpool's performance. Already talked about Konsa to Porro. The guys that I did upgrade generally, I felt like paid off.
I will say, I think going from Guardiola to Trent was the right call, absolutely. Because I don't know, I'm sure you watched the City match, but in a different capacity than I did. But Guardiola did not seem to get forward at all. You know what I mean?
He firmly part of the back 3, no offensive threat, where Trent was, I think he had 2 big chances created, like kind of right on the cusp of halftime a little bit.
He's got free kicks,
It was, Trent had 8 points, and he could have had 20 very easily in that game. So, I agree with you. The eye test there certainly was worth the extra $1 million, especially given Liverpool's opening 6 fixtures.
Yeah, so I'm going to keep my eyes open on that Guardiola spot just because, like I said, he's probably good for a clean sheet. So I'm not in a hurry to sell him. He's got 3 really good fixtures next, right? Ipswich at home, West Ham away, Brentford at home. So I'm not in a hurry to sell Guardiola, but that would probably be the one I'll look to move if I find someone more attractive. But no, the rest of your team looks good. I'm glad you took the Pedro Porro route. He got a goal. He got injured, though, also, so there's a good chance he's potentially out. So then you're putting Robinson in, which, again, Robinson's got really good fixtures coming up, so I think you've got good rotation there. What's the Michaelenko situation? Did that first Everton match give you pause for making that decision, or were you like, no, this is still fine?
I think it's fine. I mean, think of last year, everybody and their mother had Jordan Pickford. Everton started the season quite poorly. A lot of people sold Pickford. Lo and behold, end of the season, he's the top goalkeeper in FPL. I think in Everton defender, you're really buying not for the short term, but for the long term. So as a 4-5 rotation option, not too concerned right off the bat.
Yeah, right, fair. I also went Henderson, so nothing to say about the goalkeeper situation. Isak returned, was a little lucky to return from what I saw, the red card there. Unfortunate. What a bullshit red card. Can you believe he got sent off for that? That was crazy. There were some very questionable refereeing decisions this weekend that were not enough to make you like, like throw it like riot, but at the same time, like the whistle on Eze's free kick, which is one of the best free kicks you'll ever see, like what? You know what I mean? Like what? There's a lot of different things like that. I saw in the championship a ref called the corner taker offside from the corner, which is not possible.
A creative offside flag.
Yeah, you can't do that. You know what I mean? Like the ball is on the inline. Yeah, so some questionable refereeing decisions, but I do appreciate the new rule they've implemented on referee's call, or like the on-field call, or on whatever term they're using there, where they're letting the center ref kind of dictate whether it goes to review or not.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I didn't realize they had made that change. So the on-field referee is now in charge of whether something gets reviewed or not.
They certainly have more. I think there's still goals get reviewed no matter what, right? So those are still go right to VAR. But there are like penalty questions and things like that. The referee has the on-field call, and he can say, I had a good view on this. I saw it. Let's move on, as opposed to letting the VAR basically referee the whole game. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate the new...
Is Anthony Taylor aware of the rule change?
I don't know about that. Someone might have to tell him. But I appreciate the new handball rules. I think it gives us a little more clarity. We just got to kind of stick to one set of rules, right? Otherwise, we're switching them every year, and no one can really understand them. But all in all, a pretty fun opening weekend. You want to get into the games?
Yeah, I would love to. I'm with you. I was very excited that the Premier League was back. We talked about consistency at the opening of the podcast. I guess you would throw the officiating in that category as well.
That's right. That's right.
It's so early in the season, it really can't even touch me. I'm just on cloud nine regardless here. All right. So this week, kind of talking through each match, Jace and I are going to focus on overreactions to game week 1. So for each match, we will read a statement and discuss whether it is an overreaction or not an overreaction. And we're going to go through these chronologically. So Man United 1, Fulham 0. Pretty impressive performance from Man United in terms of expected goals. Dominated the game really throughout. Fulham didn't create a whole lot. Overreaction or not an overreaction, Bruno Fernandes is back. 6 shots, 3 shots on target, 1.2 expected goals. Started as false 9 for United until Xerxes came on. What did you think of Bruno's performance? Is he back in your thoughts from an FPL standpoint?
Overreaction. I think Bruno is always... I think the underlying numbers have always been there for him, but it's still been, the end product. Except for 3 seasons ago when we had the Bruno rule, when anytime he would come on, you knew you could bet the dog because United were going to come back and win. That was when they made that run under Ole. But at the end of the day, I mean, I still think there are better valued midfielders that can get you the same points as Bruno. Certainly, there were over half of them had more points than him, and or the same this game week. So I'm just not really sold on the Bruno or the United project. Again, pretty shaky match for them. I get it was the first game of the season, but still, I'm just not sold on the Ten Hag vision. So that's kind of my thoughts. I won't be going for Bruno soon. I mean, will you?
I think not an overreaction, actually. I was quite impressed with the United performance, and I think it does start building from the back. Being able to bring on actual Premier League level players.
Like Johnny Evans?
Bench. Johnny Evans still came in, but so did Matthias de Ligt, right? Which is just a massive upgrade over the depth that United had last season. And I did feel like they were able to more consistently control possession, control the ball, tilt the field, which lent itself more to opportunities for Bruno. He had the 3rd most expected goals out of any player in the league this week, behind Matoma and Thomas Souček, just ahead of Diogo Jota. Like I said, 6 shots, 3 shots on target, 3 shots in the box, and 2 big chances. He was another guy that I thought was lucky not to score 20 points. And at 8.5, his main competition is Odegaard, who I really didn't see a whole lot from this week. So I think in terms of goal threat, I definitely think Bruno is kind of back in consideration. And I'm, as much of an asshole as I think Jim Ratcliffe is, I am kind of excited to see United improve this season just because it makes that middle tier of teams that much more exciting to watch.
That's right. They are in that middle tier of teams, that's for sure.
The next match, Ipswich 0, Liverpool 2, the Premier League debut, at least for the season of Ipswich Town. Have they been in the Premier League before?
Yeah, I think it was 25 years ago.
Okay, so first time in 20 years. Congratulations to Ipswich. Welcome back.
To Ed Sheeran.
Happy to have you. This one was a little bit weird, where I felt like Ipswich in the first half defended really well. They pressed Liverpool high. They made them play long. Didn't seem like Salah or Diaz could kind of win one-on-one on the out ball. And then second half game completely changed. Liverpool dominated, controlled possession, created chances left and right. But the big takeaway from an FPL standpoint for me was Diogo Jota's continued presence as the number 9 for Liverpool. So overreaction or not an overreaction, Diogo Jota is an essential FPL pick as a 7.5 out of position midfielder.
Overreaction. I certainly don't think he's essential, especially if you already have Mo Salah, which a lot of people already do. So it's hard for me to back 2 Liverpool midfield assets. I think a lot of people that I saw on Twitter in the week leading up to the season said, Diogo Jota can't cover Mo Salah's points. And I think that is an overreaction. I think Jota can cover points from Salah as long as he stays healthy. I think he's nailed in that spot. But I don't think he's essential at $7.5 million. Not at all. He's not like the Cole Palmer 5.5 that we had last season. You know what I mean? Now, if his price tag was much lower, I'm with you. Like, he's essential. But at 7.5, again, you're getting into the Bruno territory, right? You're getting into those higher caliber of players who could go off and haul it at any week. And I don't think Jota's going to do that necessarily,
I think it's an overreaction as well, not because of the position or the price point, but I'm still expecting Cody Gakpo and Darwin Núñez to play at number 9, start at the number 9 at some point, and I think in this part of the season it's difficult to pick someone who is not nailed in their respective team. What I would ask, though, is how many weeks does Jota play at number 9 before you have to think about breaking your team, i.e. making 2, 3, 4 transfers to get him in? Because if he is still the starting 9 in game week 3, and we're seeing Gakpo substitute appearances, Champions League kicks off, and it seems like this is the guy for Liverpool, I'm strongly considering using 2 transfers in game week 3 to get Jota in. Liverpool's fixture run really is game week 1 to game week 6, so there's only this certain window here where I think he is as valuable as he's going to be. Is there a point in which this becomes not an overreaction, or have we kind of already missed the boat and we just kind of have to wait and see with UCL upcoming?
Yeah, I think we got to wait and see. I don't think it's an overreaction. My question is, who do you transfer out to bring a guy like Jota in without, like you said, chopping up your team? It would be Mo Salah for a lot of people, and after the display he put on against Ipswich, I don't know that makes a ton of sense. That seems like a negative move, not a positive move. So that's kind of where I'm at. I just think that if people have a Liverpool midfielder and it's not Jota, it's Salah, and at that point, why do you need Jota?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think maybe you want to diversify. I just say Liverpool is one of the 3 best teams in the league. This guy of assets for City, Liverpool, and Arsenal, probably the most affordable. You're getting the out of position. He kind of reminds me of Havertz last season when Havertz started playing striker. I think for me, I would look at a guy like Porro in game week 3 because Tottenham's fixtures turn. He can go down to a 4-5, and then maybe I could get Nkunku up to the 7.5 Jota. But again, it's really all about expected minutes with some of those mid-price midfielders.
Yeah, and to me, I think, and we'll talk about this in the next section on the Arsenal-Wolves match, but I think Saka at 10 million, if you're going to downgrade Salah and you don't have Saka, you can downgrade him to Saka and then upgrade another one of your midfielders to Jota. I think that makes a ton of sense. If you kind of have the FOMO of not having Saka but you want to cover Liverpool, that makes all the sense in the world to me. I think those two transfers enable that to happen. But like I said, outside that, I just don't see how you can get him in if you don't already have him and it make a ton of sense.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Arsenal Wolves. Arsenal won 2-0 at the Emirates. Our overreaction or not an overreaction here is that Bukayo Saka at 10 million is a better FPL pick than Mo Salah at 12.5 million. And the reason I throw this out there is because they both are highly owned premium midfielders. Saka's 2.5 million cheaper. In game week 1, they matched each other with 1 goal and 1 assist each. What do you think?
I think this is a spot-on take. I do think Saka is a better value pick than Mo Salah. I would add that word in there. I still think Saka, I don't think he looked great in the game personally until he scored that goal, because it was a great goal. You can't take anything away from that. But he was going down on the turf. He was limping. It didn't seem like he was effectuating a lot on that side until the goal. But that being said, at 10 million, at 2.5 million cheaper than Mo Salah, I certainly think he can cover Salah's points every week. I really do.
Okay. I have this in the overreaction category.
Okay.
Salah, game week 1, 4 shots, 3 on target, 2 big chances, 0.71 expected goals. Whereas Bukayo Saka had 5 shots, 3 on target, 4 in the box, 1 big chance created, 0.36 expected goals. So the underlying numbers certainly favor Salah's production to Saka's, but they both
but look
got
who they were playing.
a reasonable amount of shots. I don't know. Did you see the lineup that Wolves threw out without Neto, without Cunha, without Kilman? They're pretty bad. I mean, that team sheet was a lot worse than in my head what I was expecting it to be. So, to me, yeah, certainly Ipswich is the weaker team. That's the second point I would make here, though, is that Liverpool's fixtures over the first 6 weeks versus Arsenal's fixtures over the first 6 weeks. Talked about it a little bit, but Arsenal still have Brighton, Villa, City, and at Spurs in their next 4, whereas Liverpool's, I don't have their fixtures in front of me, but are significantly better. And to me, that is worth 2.5 million in the short term, but maybe not game week 6 and onward. So I think that is an overreaction right now. There is a world in which Saka outscores Salah on the season, but I would much rather have Salah within this kind of first 6 game week run.
Okay. That's fair.
Next match, Everton 0, Brighton 3. Lots of interest here, I think, in kind of the new version of Brighton, especially after your conversation with Maurizio last week. We also spent a lot of time talking about the 5.5 mids, and I think the guy that was most impressive was Minta. So my overreaction, not an overreaction here, is that Minta will score the most points out of the midfielders priced 5.5 or less. In 45 minutes in game week 1, he created 3 chances, had an expected assist total of 0.65, and I thought generally just looked incredible. So what do you think about Minta being the best 5.5?
He had an assist, didn't he?
He did have an assist.
Yeah, and he assisted Mitoma.
He did assist Mitoma on the goal
Which,
as well. So
if you recall, Mauricio and I almost gave that scenario verbatim when we were talking about the Brighton Brighton setup last episode. So I think
speaking of that, before that was one of the things that actually threw me off him a little bit. In addition to Brighton's fixtures, was the idea that Mitoma was one of the front 3, but Minta was almost like a wing back outside of Mitoma in the middle 4.
Mm-hmm.
And my first impression was, well, he's going to be too far back. He might be awesome, but that's not ideal from an FPL standpoint. I want a mid who's basically playing winger.
Right.
It just seemed not to matter in terms of his threat overall. So yeah, what did you think of him?
Yeah, I think it's a very good take. I don't think it's an overreaction by any stretch of the imagination, given I know it was Everton, but Brighton looked good. We seemed to have a fun Brighton again, which was nice because they're at the end with De Zerbi. They were not so much fun to watch. And before De Zerbi's first season, Graham Potter's last season, they were a ton of fun to watch. And I think that makes the Premier League a better place when Brighton are fun to watch. So I think it's really cool. But I do think Mente's a good player, and he's got the potential to rack up points this season. Like you said, 3 chances created, 1 assist, 0.65 XA in 45 minutes. Is he a rotation risk, though? That's kind of the big question mark right now is how is the starting 11 going to iron out here over the next 3 to 4 game weeks?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree. For me, I think it is an overreaction. I'd like to see a few more game weeks from Minta, but I would say, is he the leader in the clubhouse of the 5.5 mids after 1 game week? I think yes. I didn't see a whole lot from Smith Rowe or Kamada or Sade from Brentford. I thought had a decent game, but kind of everybody else in that bucket, he was by far the most impressive off the bat.
Yeah, did you, by the way, speaking of Brighton's new manager, did you see the tweet I sent you earlier this week where Herzler, who started Milner in the 11, right, was 9 years old when Milner made his Premier League debut?
Yeah.
That's crazy.
That is not an overreaction. That is just facts. That is pretty crazy. And here we are doing a podcast. We're 2 years away from managing a Premier League team.
That's
ourselves. So.
We really got to play more Football Manager if we're going to do that, Chris.
Yeah, amazing. All right, next match, Newcastle 1, Southampton 0. Pretty impressive for Newcastle to keep a clean sheet here despite going down a man. We already talked a little bit about the fraudulent red card, but they did pull out the win 1-0. Overreaction or not an overreaction, Newcastle will recapture their defensive form from the 2022-2023 season. Last season, defensively, bit of a mess. Season before that, if you'll remember, Trippier, Botman were FPL gods, and Newcastle was easily the best defense of the non-European teams. What do you think?
Overreaction. I still think they have a lot of work to do. Now, if they sign Gahey, right, from Crystal Palace, that's another that's a whole other conversation. I think adding someone like him to the back line does give them solidarity back there. But right now, I just think Southampton were really bad. There's no way around that. I think they were horrible. I don't think they played very well. And I think they're going to have a really tough time this season. So I think it's too early to tell right now. I think it's an overreaction, though. What do you think?
If I recall correctly, Southampton did put up a decent amount of XG. I was just pulling it up here. Yeah, 1.77 XG on 19 shots, so not a ton of XG per shot. But
they had an additional man for 75 minutes of the game, though. That's to be expected. You can't put a single one of those finishes away.
Certainly. I guess what I'm looking at here is some people might look at Newcastle and say, wow, they kept a clean sheet down a man.
Sure.
Are they back? And I think from this game week, probably an overreaction. There hasn't been a substantial amount of talent added to their back line. They're still starting Dan Burn. Botman is out. Trippier is, still coming back. I do really like Livramento. I do really like Lewis Hall. But I don't think they're anywhere near the defense they were in 2022-2023 yet, unless, as you said, if they bring in some additional reinforcements like Gahey from Crystal Palace. So I think we're agreed on that one. Bit of a lucky clean sheet for Newcastle in game week 1.
Yeah, lucky. But we'll see. They could be, who knows?
Yeah. Next match, Nottingham Forest 1, Bournemouth 1. A couple of, budget guys here. We talked about the 5-5 mids. Semenyo started at forward for Bournemouth, got his goal. He's one to watch. I wanted to focus on the forwards. There was a lot of time spent between Adam Armstrong, Chris Wood, João Pedro, Muniz from Fulham. Chris Wood's the guy who got the goal this week. Overreaction or not an overreaction that Chris Wood actually is the best budget striker within this group?
I think it's an overreaction. I don't know that he's going to maintain consistency throughout the whole season. I think him and Muniz and the other forwards that you mentioned will trade off, for him because it always happens, right? And it just depends on who you're on at the time. Personally, I was on Chris Wood a couple of weeks ago in one of my drafts. I think in our last episode, I had him as a striker, but I moved him for Muniz just because I liked Fulham's fixtures, and I had a little more faith in Muniz. But I still think it's an overreaction. We'll see. But he did get the goal. We can't take that away from him. It sucked that Semenyo got the goal because I lost my Gibbs White clean sheet, and it was very late in the game. But I digress.
Yeah. I agree. I think this is an overreaction. Of the guys in this group, didn't think Muniz had a very good game. Didn't really think Pedro was that involved from an offensive standpoint. The guy who stood out to me was Armstrong, and he had a lot of red card minutes here, so grain of
good
salt.
point.
But 5 shots, 2 on target, 4 inside the box, 1 big chance, 0.7 XG. I think if Southampton have a decent run, he could be a guy to look at as a third forward at 5.5.
Yeah, I thought Muniz played okay. He had that one bicycle kick that very well could have gone in that he made out of nothing, right? Yeah. And he's that kind of striker. I feel like he can really pull something out of nothing. I do think there's a little bit of a rotation risk with Jimenez and Muniz, given that Jimenez came on there towards the end. So I don't want to, by any means, say Muniz is the better budget striker, but I think a lot of people are going to be going back and forth between these players, when the transfers allow. So
it's a risk. I think if Muniz doesn't score against Leicester, Ipswich, we could see Jimenez out there in game week 4 as a starter, but he also may not be in my team at that point. So we'll see. I think that's a good point. Next match, West Ham 1, Aston Villa 2. Ollie Watkins, the big ticket item between the two teams in this matchup, was a ghost in this one. Now, of course, this is his first game back with the team. 13 touches, though. No shots on target. Overreaction or not an overreaction that Ollie Watkins will not be able to recapture his form from last season, will not be worth his price of $9 million.
I think it's a bit of an overreaction right now. It's the first game of the season, right? I think I'm less concerned with Watkins' form than I am with Duran's form, because he did it a couple times last season where he only got 5 or 10 minutes, but he managed to score a goal or two in that time frame. And I think with Villa's fixture schedule this season that he's going to see the field a lot more. And that's going to take minutes away from Watkins. And I think you got to be cognizant of that as we move forward. Is Watkins worth the money that he's got on his head if he's only a 60, 70-minute striker?
Yeah, probably not unless he's got a great fixture run. I think one of the things Ollie Watkins has done well historically is play matches, play 90s. Like, he's kind of from a durability standpoint, that's one of the things that he does well. But given this is his first time involved in international football, you had the Euros over the summer and the expanded format of the Champions League, he's probably playing more minutes in a calendar year than he ever has. So I agree. It's definitely something to keep an eye on. That said, if you own Watkins, there's absolutely no reason to panic in the short term. I think this is probably an overreaction. Villa's fixture run that you really want to look at starts in game week 3. So definitely hang on to him. But I'm with you. Kind of something to keep an eye on, but not necessarily probably an overreaction at this point to say that he will not be worth $9 million. Next match, Chelsea 0, Man City 2. Takeaway here, I think a big point of contention was whether to start with Haaland, not start with Haaland. This is one of the tougher fixtures in City's opening run. Haaland gets on the score sheet. Comparatively, Isak has an assist. Watkins blanks. Havertz is really the only guy who returns with a goal and an assist this week. Overreaction or not an overreaction that not starting with Erling Haaland was a mistake?
Not an overreaction. I think it's so much easier to start with Holland and work your way down than it would be to start without him and work your way up. Even if you left yourself the budget to do it, the price rises and falls that are going to happen over the next 2 or 3 game weeks are really going to affect what you're going to be able to do in the transfer business. So I think not starting with Holland was a mistake. That's why I stuck with him. And I hope that, you did too, right? You saw that as well, but I think he's 52% owned now. So
Yep.
half the game thought it was a mistake to not start with him, so they didn't.
Yeah. I think his ownership was so weird. Like, the closer and closer you got to game week 1, I think the harder and harder it was to justify going without him. So that was interesting to see. But
especially with their opening fixture run.
Yep.
Chelsea at away was the only red ticker, and Chelsea's not even really a red fixture anymore, let's be honest. Ipswich, West Ham, Brentford, next 3 matches. So, yeah. Like you mentioned, Holland might even be a triple captain candidate in the upcoming game week.
Yeah, I think your point about it's easier to start with him and sell him, especially Ipswich game week 2. And there was always the chance that he could get a goal past Chelsea. He was probably 45% to score. I mean, something like that. So
yeah,
definitely I think still worth the price. Yeah, I agree. I think given City's opening fixtures, it was a mistake to start without him. And I would say that is not an overreaction at that point.
Yeah. What my real question is, with Alvarez in the picture, it made more sense to me that, like, okay, maybe Holland won't play the full game. Alvarez will come in and play 20, 30 minutes, right? Holland didn't have an international schedule, right? But he did have that niggle earlier on in the preseason tour, right? Pep came out and said he was uncomfortable, all this stuff. So I could see a world. But without Holland in, I mean, you've got Foden at the false 9, and I doubt that is a formation that Pep wants to adopt willingly. That's more of like a reaction than like a proactive move. So to me, I don't know who they put in that spot as a true striker to replace him without changing the whole formation. So to me,
do you think they go into the transfer market?
They've got to pull a striker out somewhere, right? I think
so too.
I saw Gundogan was coming back from Barcelona because Barcelona were going to let him leave on a free just to get out of his salary so they could sign Dani Olmo. So that's interesting play, but he's not going to fill that striker role. So they've got to pull someone in over the next week and a half. Otherwise, what happens when Holland gets injured? They have to default to that false 9 again, which was just kind of some bullshit, I'll be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's definitely something to watch, especially given that City have successfully competed on multiple fronts for many years now. Holland did get the summer off, as did Odegaard, both Norwegian, but it will be interesting to see. He's unlike Ollie Watkins. He's never been a guy that's been kind of known for his durability. He has had injury problems in the past, including last season.
Robots need repaired,
Yeah, that's exactly right. They need more oil. You got to tighten up the joints.
Yeah, got to change the oil, got to rotate the tires, all that stuff.
Yeah, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I think that's a great call out on City and definitely something to watch out for, but not an overreaction, as we said, to regret. Have some no Holland regrets at this point. Last match, Leicester City won, Spurs won. I did
second
not
to
put
last match.
In reaction. Second to last match. Who else?
Well, we skipped over Brentford Palace.
Brentford Palace. Let's go there. Brentford 2,
Pivot.
Palace 1. Strong game for Mbumo. Only 2 7 million mids in the game. Mbumo and Eze. Overreaction or not an overreaction? 1, so sorry to these teams. That's an overreaction by me. 2, not include Brentford and Palace in a recap because they're both very interesting this year. 2, is Brian Mbumo at 7 million a better FPL asset than Eze at 7 million?
Overreaction. Eze's goal, free kick goal, was disallowed, right? If that ref doesn't blow his whistle right then and there, Eze's got the goal that Mbumo does. So I think it's an overreaction. I think if Mbumo was 0.5 cheaper, this is a whole other conversation. I think
Yeah.
he's in a ton more teams than Eze, just because I think he does give you a very similar output, plays a similar role in that team that Eze does in the attack. But with them being the same price, I still like Eze more.
I don't know that I do. I think it is an overreaction. I don't know that I would immediately say Mbumo is clearly a better FPL pick, and we all fucked up. I think Eze's ownership, he was like the second most owned midfielder or something like that. I mean, he was very, very highly owned for somebody playing in a non-Big Six club, which is pretty rare in FPL. Eze's underlying stats in Game Week 1 were certainly much better. I think the realization I had here was that the answer is actually both. Like, I would rather have both Eze and Mbumo kind of in my midfield, or one of them and Jota. Like, this kind of 7 million, 7.5 million midfield bracket, to me, has really started the season strong.
Yeah.
Whereas I look at my team construction, and I've got Rodgers 5 million, Smith Rowe 5.5, and Nkuku 6.5. And it makes me think about either when I wildcard or kind of use my first couple of transfers here, that price bracket structurally seems to be very attractive in terms of rotating a few key options. Now, having said that, I think both of us would say if we knew that Ivan Toney was not in the squad for Brentford, I think you would have owned Mbumo. I think I would have owned Mbumo, and I agree his ownership percentage would have been much higher.
Yeah, I don't know that I could have afforded Mbumo without sacrificing someone like Gordon. Or like I guess I could have upgraded a Gibbs White, which I probably will do at some point after this fixture run for them. But I was really surprised to see Tony not included at all. I know he's going to the Saudi League. That's fine. Brentford won 50 million for him. I was really shocked to see that he wanted out of the Premier League that badly. Maybe it's legal to bet on games in the Saudi League, and that's why he wants to go over there. Or maybe, I don't know, but. That was really strange for me to see that whole team and to see how well Brentford played without him. You know, I think credit to Thomas Frank as a manager, played that really well. So, I think, again, as I mentioned, if Mbumo was 6.5, I think his ownership would be at the 30-40% level because he's that good of a player. So, but with him being at 7, I think they're going to have very similar seasons. I think they're both relatively injury-prone-ish, or at least similarly injury-prone. They both missed a good chunk of last season to injury, so maybe when one's injured, you can scoop to the other. I think that makes sense. But yeah, you can't afford Mbumo though because you're on Salah and Haaland, right? So that kind of puts that $7 million price tag out of range for someone with like you without chopping their team up, right? People who went for the multiple premiums, and like we said, Haaland is a first class premium, not just a premium. So, interested to see because you'd probably have to chop up your team to bring Mbumo in, right?
I think a lot of people are like me and they have a 6-5, whether that is Leon Bailey, Morgan Gibbs White, or Christopher Nkunku. And I would that's the spot where if you can downgrade somebody 0.5, somebody on the bench, or like I said, defender, if you got a premium defender, those are always, I think, the easiest to break down into smaller players. That would be where I would go to upgrade. I'm not going to do it in the near term. Brentford do have some difficult opening fixtures, but we've talked a lot about that game week 6 fixture swing. I'm thinking about kind of wild card that week might make a lot of sense because Liverpool's
actual
fixtures,
wild card?
Yeah, actual wild card. Oh. Liverpool's fixtures get worse. Arsenal's get better. Cities get better. And teams like Brentford kind of swap with Palace in terms of their FDR. So I think he could be a guy maybe game week 6 that I bring in.
Yeah, that's fair.
All right. Now the last game. Leicester City won. Spurs won. Did not have an overreaction or underreaction to this because this game just finished 30 minutes ago. But Jace, if you were to give me one that you feel like is top of mind for Spurs, what would you say?
Sonny's not going to have more than 10 goals and assists this season. Okay. Overreaction, underreaction.
Where would you put the line on Sonny this year? Combined goal assists. Like, what's the number?
He had a club high of 17 goals, and I think he had 10 assists last season, so 27. Okay. So I would put the line at 10. I'm really concerned with the way he approached this match.
10 total goals and assists? Okay,
yeah.
Way over that. But, like, maybe let's say...
I said over-under reaction. Come on.
Yeah, okay. I think that is an overreaction in game week 1. But, like, there probably is something with, like, Son regression this season. He's not going to play 9 since they've brought Solanke in. They still have Richarlison. Is he just the rotation option now?
I think they're gonna trade. You know, I think Solanke is the starter right now. I think it's his spot to lose. But had Richarlison put in that goal there at the end, knocked that one in, and not completely away from the goal like he did, I think he makes a case to start the next match. You know, but I do think it's Solanke's position to lose. Now, what do you think about the people who decided to stick with Solanke or even pivoted to Solanke after that transfer from Bournemouth?
I think it makes a lot of sense to me because he went from a lower mid-table team, price comes out, and he goes to a top 6, top 7 team. So in theory, the total goals for Spurs should be higher. They play an attacking style. They've got a great opening 2 fixtures. What I couldn't get to was I want Haaland in my team, and I don't like this guy better than Watkins, Isak, or Havertz as kind of that like second tier striker, and he's too expensive as a third striker within that system. But later in the season, Spurs have a good fixture run. Let's say you don't have Haaland at that point in time. He is, I think, one of the 4 big strikers in the game now, right? Havertz, Watkins, Isak, Solanke are kind of the guys not named Erling Haaland that you would probably consider for your FPL team. So I'm totally fine starting with him. Ange was pretty forward about including him right away. So from a minute standpoint,
started him immediately.
Reasonable gamble. I just didn't think it made sense in game week 1. But I think he will be a good pick throughout the season.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's his spot to lose. So we'll see how we do. But I do think Spurs' success this year will be directly correlated with how many goals and assists Sonny can produce. And the way he played today, I was pretty disappointed.
Yeah. Okay. So let's just say Son regression.
Yeah.
Not an overreaction.
Not an overreaction.
Okay. I would agree with that. I buy that he's a regression candidate for sure. All right. That's all the games from game week 1. Let's really quickly look ahead to game week 2. Jace, I know you mentioned that you already made a transfer for a Manchester United defender. Quick trigger.
Mazraoui, not Xerxes, Mazraoui.
The Maserati of the Manchester United defense. For me, I don't plan on making any transfers. There's probably for me a very, very small list of players for which I would make a transfer for in game week 2 off of game week 1. Maybe Jota is the only guy in this list where, let's say you started with Odegaard, you're looking at Arsenal's upcoming fixtures, or you started with Bruno. Bruno played so well, I think it's going to be hard to transfer him out, but maybe a downgrade to Jota, at least for the next couple of weeks, could make sense. But I really don't see anybody beyond that unless you thought somebody was going to start and didn't start, or something has just gone horribly wrong. Like Kulusevski, right? You probably pick that one out, right, as a mistake. What do you agree kind of with that approach?
Yeah, I do. I still don't think it's a mistake. I think the mistake here was made by Ange, not by me. So we'll see how the Everton fixture works out. No, I think you're right. Jota, I think, is getting a lot of play, right? Mente is another one that I think people will look at because he's easily attainable. You've got Chris Wood and a few others, but they're kind of people, like you said, you're like, I like them, but I don't need them right now, right? Phil Foden's one of those guys, right? Like I was going to go into the season with Foden. I saw that he was a playtime risk, as Pep mentioned, so I backed out of Foden. But when he came on the field, he could have scored several times. You know, he could have assisted several times. I thought he played really well. So I think he's one of those players that I'm going to own in the future, and I'll just keep my eyes on him. But right now, like you said, The only one I wanted to get rid of was Barco, just because he didn't even feature. He was very highly owned. I didn't want to lose that money. I see a lot of potential in Mazzucchelli. Like I said, I think his fixtures are pretty decent swap with Ben White's, because they got Brighton, Liverpool, Southampton, and Ben White has Aston Villa, Brighton, Tottenham. So I can just switch them in and out
and rotate
and keep my other two defenders who all have green fixtures. So to me, it made too much sense, and I didn't want to not be able to get the move done by losing money on Barco with a price drop, which I think he was 40% of the way there before we started this podcast.
I'm sure he'll go down this week after not playing. He was so highly owned. Yeah,
there will be reactionary people like me. So I wanted to prevent that. So I broke the FPL rule about transferring early, but it is what it is. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to captaincy then. After talking about transfers, the two guys this week. Haaland, 8.9 expected points. Mo Salah, 8.1 expected points. The next guy below that is Son at 6.4. So there's a pretty big gap this week between the top two guys and the rest of the field. You and I have talked about triple captaining Haaland this week. I don't think it makes sense for Salah, but Haaland specifically, what are your thoughts on using the triple captainship at home to Ipswich?
I think it's bold. I think it's less bold given the fixture schedule this season, with the less opportunity for double single game weeks. That's not to say that there won't be any, though, and I just want people to hear that, right? Because things can still happen, right? Yeah. In the winter, games can get snowed out. We could have the passing of another monarch. Like there's several things that could happen that could result in a double or single game week, progressing to the next stages of Champions League, Europe, all that stuff. So things to consider. That would be my only hesitation. That being said, I think this is the best fixture he's going to have. He's healthy. He's coming off a single goal. Historically, I think a Haaland at home against a promotion side is going to do pretty well. You know what I mean? You saw what he did at home against the Hatters last season. It wasn't in the Premier League. It was in FA Cup or whatever. But just put 4 in on him. So I think there's a very good chance I play the triple captain on Haaland this week just to get it out of the way.
Yeah, I mean, based on his projection, it's like 1.7 returns or something like that. So I think if you go for the triple captain, you get 2 returns this week. Probably a win, chalk it up, walk away, great, can kind of play out the rest of the season. 1 return or a blank is probably an unsuccessful triple captain chip, but then you can sort of play around it, I think, the rest of the season. So I'm with you. I feel like from a fixture standpoint, best fixture in the league. He's just had the summer off. He's healthy. He's available. Champions League has not started yet. There's no positional cover for him now that Alvarez is gone. I think if you were going to take that risk early on, and to your point, there will be double game weeks. There will be less of them this year, but there could still be a City double game week in the future. But you have a high degree of certainty going into game week 2 that Erling Haaland is going to get 90 minutes or close to it at home to a promoted side. I think that's an opportunity that's too juicy to pass up for me, given how hard it is to get Haaland and Salah back into your team once they go out. So I'm probably 90 to 95% playing the triple captain chip this week. Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm right there with you too. Like I'm not going to hit the button yet, but there's a good chance I've hit it by Thursday night. Another piece, and this isn't for everybody, but my bench looks really good this week too. We've got 3 home fixtures and an Arsenal away fixture. I've got Henderson, West Ham, Smith Rowe against Leicester, Harwood Bells against Nottingham Forest, and then again, like I said, White's at Aston Villa. And that's not a horrible look for a bench of players who are going to play.
Yeah, so it's not bad, but I think when you have so much money in your starting lineup tied into Haaland that the odds of you getting a better bench boost team in the future, especially like off a wild card, I think are probably higher, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the triple captain is the better chip to use here. But all I'm saying is early on, as we mentioned last season in the podcast, getting some of these chips out of the way during smart plays is not a you don't necessarily have to hoard your chips all season, right? And you'll be pleased to know, I'm sure, that you saw that the free hit chip was able to be played.
I did.
So we don't have to change. We don't have to
week,
change the name of the podcast, which is great.
God. Thank God.
So I'm with you. I think triple captain Holland against Ipswich Sound at home is too juicy to pass up. Only thing that would keep me from doing that would be early news that Holland isn't starting.
Yeah, for sure. Any sort of leak or something like that. But yeah, hopefully the big man plays this week and comes good for us here on Free Hit. Well, Jace, it's good to be back. Really enjoyed the overreaction, not overreaction segment. I'm sure at the end of the season we will look back at ourselves and laugh. But hopefully, I think some of these hopefully we will get right. So cheers to the league being back this season. And again, just want to thank everybody for listening to the show. Just a reminder, if you are listening, please rate, review, and subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your shows. Reviews are really important to getting our podcast out there. We are on social media on X and Instagram at FPL_freehitpod. And join us next week to recap Game Week 2 and look forward to Game Week 3. Good luck.